until you let go, that thing, that really important thing that you want, that you deserve, that you need, it can't come in. There is no room for it. Until you let go, it can't come in. Oof, how does that feel? This is the energy update for June 15 through to June 22. I'm Daisy Mack, and this is Spiritual Mixtape. It isn't weird if you are feeling anxious, dysregulated, or nervous right now. What you have to do in this situation and this week in general, when you're feeling those complex emotions, is ask yourself, what old story, what old part of your identity are you still invested in protecting? Because that is the thing that is holding you back. That is the thing that's holding you on. When you let go, as the old saying goes, what if you don't fall? What if you fly? It's true to this week. And even though I've been saying every week, and all the people have been saying that every week, has said once in a lifetime, rare energy, this and that, there is a build that's happening right now. And this week has that because it's also got a solstice. It's also got Chiron moving into Taurus at 0 point of beginning energy. When you let go of the wound, the beginning is actually the medicine. It's actually the balm. It's the plaster. It's the thing. But you can never get to the medicine without first stopping covering the wound. My wound, it's so painful. It's so painful. The thing on my arm and you've become so wrapped up in the identity of the person with the wound on the arm that you've forgotten that it's actually healed. It's really doing so well. And when you just let it air, there's the medicine. You're going to keep coming over this week, and I would love to hear in the comments, what is the story that you're leaving behind? What is the wound that you're leaving behind? What is that old part of your identity that you are protecting, desperately protecting, for no real reason anymore? The things that used to bother you, that somehow you're defaulting to because this is a moment where you're more anxious. What is that you need to let go of? You're only at the beginning of a part you haven't done yet. That's the gem of this week. When you get past the messiness and the anxious energy and the dysregulation that comes with this week, you're only at the beginning of a part you haven't done yet. That's why it feels weird. It doesn't feel weird because you can't do it. It just feels uncomfortable because you haven't done it before. You're unfamiliar with it. You're coming into this situation expecting yourself to be an expert, expecting yourself to be able to ride the horse, race the car, but you've actually never been in the saddle or in the driver's seat for this particular race. You're only at the beginning of a part you haven't done yet. Let's get into the update. So let's talk about these testy days again. I brought them up in the first week of June, and this week on the 17th, so that's the Wednesday, we have one of our testier days, and they've each building to the ultimate test on the 29th of the month. And again, I've been referencing that since last month. There is what I'm going to call on the 29th a pile up of energy. So you have a full moon in Capricorn, but you also have Mercury retrograde, Mars squaring the lunar nodes. That's the one. Jupiter enters Leo. There's a lot happening on that day. But if you have found that Friday last week, so this is yesterday for me, it was Uranus squaring the lunar nodes. If you found yesterday confronting, so Friday the 12th of June, pay attention to what came up for you, what you're still changing, and what could potentially come around the 29th to be prepared. And I know that I'm saying all month, the whole energy of the month is to surrender, which is to basically be not prepared for these things. I say it from a place of don't be blindsided. there are certain things that when you look back at the whole course of the month, you'll be like, of course that was going to come up. Of course that needed to happen so that Y could come in. And until I let go of X, it was never going to arrive. That's what I mean. So it's not about don't surrender, keep controlling, force the outcome. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, what are the lessons? Where have you not fully graduated class? What else can you do? Venus opposing Pluto in retrograde is very much about what hasn't been visible, what's underneath. This is Pluto in retrograde coming to the surface. And intuitively, you are already feeling this. You are already anticipating it. You just haven't necessarily put words to it. And that's the difference between June's testy days and May's testy days. There was no way of sort of rolling into May and preparing yourself for what was coming, for building a practice or a lifestyle of surrender. You just sort of had to get in the trenches, get in the mess and enjoy it. And actually, in the closer look for this week, I start by saying about Wednesday. In fact, I should just read it to you. That surrender control, and where you can, laugh at the mess. Like, do laugh at your tougher days. Like, do see the small flowers that grow from it. The part of you that always knew that conversation had to happen, but you hadn't had the opportunity. And that's not necessarily because you were hiding. I know that with Pluto, we have, especially in retrograde, we have this idea that we're hiding things and things are coming to the surface and we're very much not in control. But there are certain aspects of your life that you do completely have sovereignty over. But perhaps if you were like me during Uranus and the lunar nodes last week, you perhaps knew that this conversation was always meant to happen, but you honestly didn't have the time or the space. It wasn't the right timing. Wasn't the right timing. Sometimes just because we feel something, we can't always act on it. And the universe, when you surrender, will present the right opportunity for you to have a difficult conversation so that you can feel seen, heard, and move on. The biggest thing I took really from the testy days so far is how much of old stories I'm still holding on to. And of course, we're coming in to a Mercury retrograde on the 29th, which always asks us for the re-edit. Since the last retrograde, what have you learned? Since the last time Mercury was dancing with these particular planets, what have you learned? So Mercury retrograde begins on the Capricorn full moon. So since Capricorn season, and of course, here we are again talking about that point last year, the end of last year, that December time, beginning of this year, what have you learned? What have you learned that you need to release finally that's going to get you into that fire horse? For me, I have not felt fire. I have felt slow horses. I do have a lot of fire horse friends, though. I do feel very buoyed by my friendship groups and my community. But personally, I just couldn't get more messages to slow down. But getting back on track and talking about this Wednesday, talking about this week's particular testy day, what can I tell you about it to make you feel good? Well, I think that what's really important in life right now in general is to acknowledge that things aren't fair. Not to settle for things not being fair, but that sometimes, even when you're right, even when you deserve things to go your way, they don't always work out the way that is fair. That doesn't mean that the right energy and the right karma isn't coming back to you. In fact, I think when those moments happen, you will end up having double the goodness further down the line. I know that people will agree with that. It just really sucks when you're on the other side of it, doesn't it? It's horrible. But I would say that all of us here have probably felt like that in the last 6 months. I definitely feel like that. For the whole of Chiron in Aries has been a really painful awakening that I do feel so grateful for now. But I still think I would have picked an easier path if you let me. You know, when people say, oh, but I would have, I wouldn't change a thing. I would. I know it's made me who I am, but I would still take the easy path. I still would. Why would I pick my dad having cancer? That's always my really true example. So hard at the end. My big, confident, fun, caring dad who was always very selfless. Why would I have picked him going that way? No, he may have been, an ordinary guy who built houses and, had a pretty, on paper, ordinary life, but he was a very extraordinary person, and he should have had an extraordinary death. And really, cancer isn't that. So that's what I mean, like, when I think about the last few years and, like, wouldn't change it. Of course, I do also understand that if that hadn't have been so hard for me and seeing my dad like that, I probably wouldn't have ever left my job. I knew that if I'd stayed in music, I understand now that if I'd stayed in music, I would have got cancer. Everything that I've just gone through with the mastectomy, that was toxic stress in my body. Not that the music industry was, but how I worked in it was unhealthy for me. And seeing my dad go through that at the end of his life, when really, he really should have had at least another 5 years of fun and frolics and adventures and the ordinary and the mundane. And he didn't. And that's the kind of lesson that I mean. That's the kind of change I wouldn't really want. Or the kind of change I would want. But all of that to say, these testy days, they are framed so differently in June. And what I came out of Friday's Uranus and the lunar nodes, understanding, even though it wasn't about the piece of confrontation that I was in, I really understood that there were some stories and there was some anger and there is some upset that isn't fair. And I just need to leave it behind. And I've felt that story really come through. Maybe since 2022, but I wasn't ready to embody it then. I understood it maybe, but wasn't in my heart, wasn't in my spirit. And I have felt through this slowdown since November, and really since Saturn moved into Aries in March, I have really felt my heart expand. My ability to understand my identity from a place of an expanded heart is so much more prevalent. And I see it also with clients, the ability to talk back what was once very painful into a place of still holding both the grief and the love and the complexity of it all, but also being able to close the chapter. That's what came up for me with the lunar nodes. And I'm interested to know, please tell me in the comments if you found that last week, because I do think that dials in to how we are going to feel in Mercury retrograde, which starts on the 29th, but also how we are going to feel on Wednesday, which is the testy day, and the other testy day is the 29th. So let me just read you a little bit of the closer look for this week. So Wednesday, the 17th, Venus opposes Pluto retrograde, surrender control, and where you can, laugh at the messiness of it all. Things are unfair sometimes, but all that does is show you that you care. And if something, someone, or someplace matters to you, it's time to explore your reasons why. Are you really sure that the things that irk you this Wednesday are the things you actually still care about? Or are these old ties not soul ties? I couldn't resist. That is a Love Island reference. This week takes you on a journey with your identity. We're going to come to this as well with Chiron in Aries and Taurus. And what surfaces today may not be a repeating pattern that you should give time to. Because if you ask yourself truly and deeply, do you actually care about this? Like, do you? Do you care about the things that are going to bother you on Wednesday? At first glance, this can feel very confronting, and it may make you hold your breath and flip into a freeze response. But was this hidden because you weren't ready to deal with it, and now you are? In fact, you are so ready that if you dial back your old response, you'll see that you don't actually care. You probably stopped caring a long time ago. Today is information. It is not instruction. Something you have been working for, perhaps indirectly, is now visible, and that's the true heart of today's confrontation. Even love has a shadow. That's what this feels like. You are strong enough, ready enough, and good enough to move through this sort of complexity. And always there is good on the other side of growth. So that is the testy day. We'll talk a little bit more next week about how to deal with what's coming on the 29th and how to use that week to prep for the ideas of surrender, surrendering control, surrendering the outcome. You are doing so well on this. Let's keep going. We've talked about this so much on the pod, and we will always talk about this at Spiritual Mixtape and the Energy Update. Chiron. Chiron is a really big energy signature for me personally. I'm looking at my beautiful Chiron gong over there. It was the first gong I bought. It was the first gong I ever played when I did my certification when I was training back in 2018. The wounded healer, the archetype of the wounded healer. And I think it's such an important part of this whole community. The wounds we carry and never fully heal. And the thing that's been quite magical about Chiron and Aries is a lot of the painful wounds that most of us have carried for our whole life have had the opportunity to heal and are just scars now. Chiron and Aries was really about worth, courage, identity. A lot of us have changed since it came in. So over the last 7 and 8 years, have really changed what we do, who we do it with, how we create meaning. And I think some of us may have a little bit of trepidation of, oh my gosh, are we about to do this again in a different sign? Yes, to a certain degree, for sure. But the fundamental, who am I? What is my worth? What is my value? Those questions are answered. Doesn't mean that they won't still coming up. We're still human. You'll still see that scar, but you're not necessarily playing from it anymore. Hopefully. With all that being said, what happens right now in terms of logistics? Chiron this week on Thursday, in fact, moves into slow-moving, stable Taurus. And it stays there for 3 months at 0 point. Then in September to April 14th, I think it's September 19th, it moves back into Aries for the final part of this story. So we get to go back and do a final semester. Well, it's not even a final semester, is it? It's 2 semesters. We get to do our final year of Chiron and Aries, the wound of worth. I like to think of Chiron and Taurus because it's always about a wound, is the wound of neglect. A lot of people will talk about it from way different angles, and that's okay. There's many ways to read the same energy because we are all having an individual experience. Don't get caught up on things that don't resonate. What I'm saying about Taurus and Chiron today may really, really resonate with you today, but in 3 years' time, when you've moved through it, no more. But bookmark it if it does. Come back to it. And I will make a special episode and I will start writing a bit more about these things so that you have more resources. It's really difficult to get into the depth of the importance and the nuance of this energy in just one podcast. But here is what I would want to say to you about it. Chiron is about to leave, whether it's leaving this week or whether it's leaving in April. It's been here since 2018 and it's finally packing up, ordered the removal men, and it's moving out. It's the wound of worth, identity, and how we find our courage from those two aspects. It moves into the 0 point of Taurus. This is thought of as an initiation point, a beginning point, a starting page. Just the weight of that should feel like something as well. Like that should nudge your heart. You should feel this in your body as well, because Taurus is the body. This is going to be a very physical awakening with your wound. If your sense of worth has been tied to what you do, this asks for something different. Worth that has to be felt, worth that is intrinsic, not earned. It is the idea of feeling without proof. So I pulled the people in my community and I asked them what they wanted to know about this transit, so I could shape this episode around what would really help you right now in this moment. So here are the two questions that I've thought were really resonant. If my worth isn't in what I have or what I have produced, then what is it actually in? And how do I find that when I've never had to before? Well, I think you have had to before. And I think that that is half the mystery of life. And it's why we are so lucky to be living in this moment where we get to have had Chiron in Pisces, Chiron in Aries, and Chiron in Taurus now, where we really get to understand what makes us feel safe. The big quote that I wrote down about this when I was doing my notes for the podcast: where your energy is creating a stable life or not. If you were like me in my old music industry job, I had this big job, I had this big salary, I had this big title, and you think on paper that's creating a stable life. But the energy wasn't. It was chaos, it was disruptive, and it caused toxic stress in my body. My life now, the energy of it is stable. It doesn't have the obvious money, the obvious title, the kudos of the people I was working with, but it does create stability. It is so much more sustainable. And I want to say my Chiron is in Taurus in the final degrees in my actual chart. So I feel like I've had the combine of Chiron in Aries and Chiron in Taurus. So as we come into Chiron in Taurus, which is probably going to be the same for a lot of people around my age, because we were born in Chiron in Taurus, this does feel like a coming home. A sense of knowing your whole life what creates stability versus what creates chaos but looks like you're creating stability. To be really honest with you, in my first few jobs when I lived in London, and I used to daydream in those long days of stacking shelves, doing something that didn't demand so much of me, and that's also ADHD. I always knew, is the point, what looked stable on the outside was incredibly unstable on the inside. And I think that this does really speak to the leaving of Aries and the wound of worth. If my worth isn't in the external and the tangible, and it's in the internal, and I don't really have much self-worth, of course this is going to be incredibly hard. And I say this from knowing this. I went through such a change after leaving the music industry, knowing that I had to leave, really not being well enough to stay, but also having zero worth without that money, without my salary defining it for me. And you can do this, because even in your lowest moments, you do know that you are worth more. You do know that you're worth whatever life it is that you're dreaming of, whether it's slow, whether it's enough time to play with your kids, whether it's enough time to go to the gym and take care of yourself. You know Like I said about dreaming about being stacking shelves in the grocery store, I knew that I wanted something slower, that something that felt more sustainable, that even if, stacking the shelves in a grocery store would pay me a quarter of what I got paid in those corporate jobs, but it created 100% more quality of life. I could leave work smiling. I didn't have to check my emails. What's the payoff? You always know, is my point. You're not overwhelmed by this. And here is my other really good quote that I've come up with notes today. You're just at the beginning of a part you haven't done yet. That's it. You're just at the beginning of a part you haven't done yet. So, second question from the community. I'm scared of losing what I've built. How do I tell the difference between a fear I should listen to and a fear that's just the old wound talking? Hello, I'm just going to give you breath work here. This whole month has been incredibly dysregulating. And for someone that practices every day and does make the effort to try and get on the treadmill and do the things, I have been completely dysregulated. I've been anxious about things that usually would never make me anxious, like a scratch on my car. I lost my mind about. Didn't quite lose my mind, but I was definitely like, wow, okay, this is not usual me. This is old me. This is someone who is not surrendering to this right now. And just, the scratch is there. You'll deal with it when you have time. This is someone that is desperately trying to control the outcome. The outcome's there on the door. It's scratched. Let it go. Let it go. Laugh at the messiness. Shit happens. Don't be scared of losing what you've built. Although I do agree that is a very real fear in the world that we're living in right now, which is, again, a whole other podcast episode. But you can't live from that place. If you live from the place of just protecting what you have, you'll never get anything new. You'll never make new friends. You'll never get the new house. You'll never get a car that's not got that scratch on it. I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on the material of it all, but if you spend all your time protecting the thing that you made, rather than asking, what can you make next? What can you share? What can you grow with others? You will always be in fear and lack. All common themes of sweet Taurus, of sweet Aries, and of course of Chiron. We will talk more about this because the story isn't ending until April next year. And then the story begins for Taurus properly. But with everything that I've said about the testy days and about the Chiron and Taurus of it all, what are you being shown? Patterns that you haven't fully released, grudges you haven't fully released. Talking about myself here. Where do you need to give it all up for a new storyline? And I'm going to bring in Love Island one more time here, because as a 42-year-old woman watching these young kids in love, I love Love Island. I'm British, it's a thing. And what I realize is you watch all these girls in particular, and even the guys, but let's talk about the girls for a minute, with the same insecurity that they've had all their life. And you just think, all you need to do is live in the sunlight here. Your shadow may make better TV for the producers, but for your experience, you are so lovely and so pretty and so wanted. But by you coming from the place of, I need to protect that one thing I've built, that one connection I've built over this week, rather than being like, well, if I lose it, what else could come in? If I lose it, but I show my best self, isn't that the better storyline? That's what we are being asked over and over again in this aspect, in the other aspects. And thank goodness that June has been kind enough to give us space to integrate and to ask the questions and to grow. I know my uncomfortable truths and shadows and the grudges and the things I don't like about myself that make me insecure, that make me question my worth. But I also know that the only person that's looking at me and holding on to that is actually me. Nobody else. You're not looking at me thinking, oh, Daisy, you're X, Y, and Z. Only I am. And that's what really has to end this month. And I love it when there's a month where it's not shaking you into moving and deciding and getting through this. I'm going to close the podcast this week by talking about the solstice. Now, if you know anything about me, I am very, very, very crazy for a solstice. I'm born on the winter solstice. I love an equinox. I do all of my business planning around the equinoxes and the solstices. I think that they are energetically important gateways in a year. And I think that they make sense even for people that don't believe in the spirituality of life, because they are natural gateways and portals through the seasons and through the harvests, and they talk to the natural rhythms and patterns of the planet. Now, all I really have to say about the solstice is that it's a turning point. It's also Father's Day, and it's the beginning of Cancer season. It's a moment to pause, look within your home setup, your emotional setup, and plan for the year, rest of the year accordingly. For me, I am further along than I've probably understood or given myself credit for, because I'm not further along externally, but internally I am. Does that feel true for you? If it does, then what is your plan? And I know that we're in surrender, but we've already talked a little bit about the difference between the personal plan, the commitment that you're making to yourself, and the surrender to the things you can't control. But between now, whichever hemisphere you're on here, so the June solstice to the December solstice, what are you creating? And if we talk about it from the energy that's imprinting right now, identity and courage, stability and energy, the lunar node, what feels fated, Mercury retrograde, what you want to rewrite, reevaluate, script. Ooh, screenplay came up there in my thoughts. What are you turning into a production? What is coming off of paper and coming into real life? I think for a lot of us, we felt held in place. Either you've been waiting for a job, looking for a job, you have been building something that you can't quite step into, your side hustle or whatever. And, you know, you're really seeing, okay, I will surrender to the plan, but I'm also going to create some good energy and good circumstances around the thing that I love and I'm creating. So that's where I want to leave you on this podcast and on solstice energy. I always want to mention it, even if I don't have the opportunity on a longer pod like today's, to really tell you, what I love. And from a community standpoint, I'm going to put up my old solstice breathworks and meditations into the community, but also dropping into the community in terms of breathwork this week is the surrender, unconditional love, Cancer season. Those are the new breathworks coming in if you want something fresh. Those are in the free community. Unconditional love and surrender are in the paid side, but there's a 7-day free trial. So you do you. But come into a practice that does regulate your nervous system. I will really push this next week because the 29th is not something that you should be unprepared for, even if you're opting for surrender. Okay, I really love hanging out with you. Please drop your comments in. Tell me about your testy days. Tell me about your surrender. Tell me about how Chiron feels for you. Do you feel like my community members, where you're feeling like feeling from a place of lack, or feeling from a place of what does my worth look like when it's not external? Tell me all the things. I love, love, love hearing from you, and I love to do this. And thank you for being here.